We're at Castillo de Chapultepec.
Yay!
What do you know about the Mexican-American War?
I know that it was from 1846 to 1848.
Great.
Okay. It started over a dispute over the border of Texas. Basically, we claimed it was the Rio Grande further south, and Mexico claimed it was the Nueces River. And then we sent some troops to just kind of like hop over that border and mess around in there, saying that it was our territory. There was fighting, blood was spilled, and basically both sides blamed the other. Mexico said, you're in our territory. We said, nope, we claimed this territory. And then we go to war. There's a big yada, 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 which we will talk about. And in the end, that's how the U.S. acquires the Mexican cession, which is basically all the way out to California.
So we're in Castillo de Chapultepec right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Battle of Chapultepec.
Yes.
Which you know more about because you know about this mural that's right in the castle.
What I do know about the battles in the Mexican-American War, I know some of the biggest ones were the invasion and the occupation of Veracruz, where U.S. forces, the U.S. Navy went down and occupied Veracruz, and like civilians were fighting against American military. And then I do also know that we marched our troops. Ironically, we took a similar path that Cortez took to get from the beaches into what was Tenochtitlan. And our troops end up in Mexico City. And basically, this is on a hill. It was a military academy. Mm-hmm. And so this was like one of the last bastions where they were trying to defend against the American invasion. Mm-hmm. And it was a bunch of soldiers, but then a lot of like military students.
Yes.
Yes.
And what do you know about the boy heroes?
Yeah, so I know that there were students who were military cadets. I think they ranged from like 13 to 17 or 18.
Yeah,
they
pretty young.
They were preteens and teenagers. And they basically decided like not to evacuate. They decided to stay and fight. And so they were defending the castle. And then as the U.S. soldiers are storming the castle, instead of surrender, they threw themselves off the hill and died and became known as Los Niños Héroes, the hero boys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what this particular mural is in remembrance of.
So like you notice some things. You notice like the skeleton sort of horse with the American flag in the background. And then you notice this kid wrapped in the Mexican flag, jumping and falling to his death.
Yep.
You can see like the broken ships over in the bottom left corner.
Yeah.
From like the invasion of Veracruz.
The eagle behind the boy. So we're outside Castillo de Chapultepec, which, fun fact, was one of 2 royal residences in North America that was actually inhabited by monarchs at the time. So this one, and then also the Palace de Iturbide, where Augustine lived when I guess he was a monarch.
And where was that?
Also Mexico City.
Yeah, Iturbide started out as he like took over for the revolution, and he like steered it in a more conservative direction, and then he decided to stay.
That's all we can say here, and then I want to sit down and talk at length about Max.
Because this was Maximilian's castle.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yes. Okay, so now you might be thinking, Emily, why is Maximilian I involved in Mexico? How does that make any sense? How does he tie into Napoleon III? Yes. Why are France and Austria doing things in Mexico in the 1860s?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Asking me.
Emily, what do you know about Benito Juarez?
I know that Benito Juarez was a president of Mexico. He was a fairly like liberal in the kind of global sense, liberal, indigenous person. I believe fairly elected. He like passed a lot of reforms in Mexico. And he was very popular, especially because he was with the indigenous people.
Yes.
Okay.
So he was around, I want to say 1850s.
Okay.
And then in the 1860s, Benito Juarez stopped paying payments to France and to Austria. That gave France and Britain and Austria an excuse to get involved in Mexico. Now, here's the thing. It's the 1860s, early 1860s when this is happening. What is happening in the United States in the 1860s?
Civil War.
Yes. Emily, do you remember a massive piece of legislation that was passed in 1823 in the United States that said this land is our land?
The Monroe Doctrine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these European powers were like, well, the U.S. is not going to enforce the Monroe Doctrine because they're in the midst of their civil war. So now is our time to intervene and try to get in with what's going on in Mexico and put one of our leaders on the throne there.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So, got to talk a little bit about government and political ideology before we talk about Maximilian. I'm just going to call him Maxi from now on because that sounds great. So when you're thinking about the line of the political spectrum, moderates are in the middle. You have conservatives on the right. Conservatives want to maintain the status quo.
Right. For them, the right.
Conservatives are on the right. You want to maintain the status quo. And then you have reactionaries who are like, everything's terrible, we need to go back to the way it was before. Liberals are on the left. Liberals say, hey, we should implement some new changes. And then the far left, you have revolutionaries. So when Benito Juarez became president, he was on the liberal side and was like, we want to change everything. We don't like the way that things have been going on in Mexico. Let's make all new reforms that are benefiting the regular people and not just the elite class.
My understanding is that already what was happening is that some of the governments going back and forth in Mexico were either like, are we going to be basically closely tied to the U.S. and the West, like financially, economically, or do we want to be like a leader in Latin America, our own?
So Benito Juarez, when he came to power, led what is called, or was part of what is called the Reform Wars, which was a war between liberals and conservatives.
An actual war?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
3-year civil war.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
So the liberals won. Benito Juarez becomes president, and this conservative faction was like, we can't have this. We need to have some kind of traditional monarchy. We need to go back, way back, and claim our Hapsburg rule under Charles V, because Charles V was emperor when
Cortez
conquered the Mexica.
Oh, wow. They're going way back.
Yes. And they were like, well, Maximilian II, Maximilian I,
Maxi,
is a descendant of this Habsburg king. So what if we have him? He's not doing anything else in Europe right now. He's not ever going to be emperor because his brother is emperor. What if we have him come be the king, monarch of Mexico?
Whoa.
So they invite him over. He eventually says yes, agrees to the emperorship in Vienna, and then actually comes over here in 1864.
And these are conservatives in Mexico?
Yes.
Like probably conservative elites who probably like the status quo,
yes,
like the situation as it is, and want to be very friendly with the elites, especially in Europe and the United States, because they'll benefit.
Yes.
Okay, great.
But, hot take, Maxi is a liberal. Let me read some things he tries to do.
Okay.
Essentially more education, more religious toleration. They wanted to diminish the power of the Catholic Church and allow people to choose their own religion. So Maximilian was raised in that culture, and he comes over here and he's like, hey, wow, Catholic Church in Mexico has had way too much influence. We need to get rid of that, pass laws where you can practice any religion that you want to practice without being persecuted. And he also forced the sale of church lands, which I think is very interesting.
Oh no, that's just gonna get him in trouble.
Yes.
With certain groups.
Indeed. He also attempted to create laws that would modernize Mexico, but ultimately could not enact them because he ruled for a very short period of time.
And like his backers were the conservatives.
Right.
So that then are gonna wanna yoink.
Yes, but let me give you an example of some of these laws that he tried to enact. He wanted to pass a law that guaranteed indigenous peoples a living wage, and he also wanted to abolish corporal punishment.
Oh, okay.
So like when we're looking at kind of this wave of conservatism that's in Europe at the time, he was not a part of that. He was way more liberal, and then he comes over here and tries to bring these liberal ideas under the pretense by these conservative leaders who brought him over here that
he's like a sleeper agent. He's a liberal sleeper agent.
Also, he wanted to set up new schools that were modeled after like the German gymnasium schools. So he wanted to give everyone access to education, and he wanted to pass all laws in Spanish and Nahuatl. I know.
Oh, wow. Okay, he reminds me, so he is your Lafayette. This is how I feel about the Marquis de Lafayette.
Okay.
Is like a rich boy from Europe who has every reason to be awful,
yes,
and then actually weirdly is like very...
Yes.
What happened to Maximilian?
So the U.S. Civil War ends, and the U.S. then gives Benito Juarez $30 million to take back power from Maximilian.
Oh.
Which I had never heard of before.
The U.S. government?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Which I'm kind of shocked by, because why would they want Benito Juarez in power rather than European? Because they don't want European influence.
Yeah, I think they probably saw Benito Juarez as easier to control.
Yes.
He would be easier to be kind of their puppet, whereas they saw Maximilian as the puppet of the European powers.
Yes.
But it does seem strange to me that they wouldn't just pick someone new, someone that wasn't still also a liberal indigenous president. But maybe they felt like he would have the support of the people.
Yes.
That's interesting.
So then Maxi makes a really bad move, passes the Black Decree, says if you are a supporter of Juarez in any way, you are immediately to be assassinated.
Oh no!
And like 11,000 supporters of Juarez die.
Even though like a lot of his reforms were like support indigenous people, no Nahuatl language, but then ultimately it's like his power.
Yeah.
Dang it.
I know.
Okay.
France had been supporting a lot of the Mexican rule under Maximilian. And as soon as the U.S. got involved, these European powers were like, ooh, this is going to be unwinnable. Like, we're not just going to waste resources here because we know the U.S. is going to be relentless in their pursuit of getting rid of Maximilian. So France pulls out all of their support, and ultimately Maximilian, after 3 years, is captured and is assassinated.
By like Juarez supporters?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then what I know, we can just kind of fast forward, is that I don't know if this is immediate, but I know that after Benito Juarez rules is when we see the rise of the Porfiriato under Porfirio Diaz. So something that happens across Latin America a lot is this back and forth between like reactionaries and revolutionaries and like conservative, liberal, back forth. And so, yeah, this goes along with that, although Maximilian is this weird one in the middle who's like both and none of them. Like they think he's going to be a conservative, then he's weirdly a liberal, and then he goes back to conservatism to get his power. Fascinating.
Yeah.